we are all delegates here in Virginia, and people who are on this call care about the environment. So we want to push people forward to use all this excitement about this incredibly important issue to activate all of us. So what we're going to start out with then, I just want to talk very briefly, going on with what you had said about Representative Ocasio-Cortez's and Senator Markey's Green New Deal resolution. And as I said, I'm a teacher and an advocate, I'm Mariana White, and I'm co-hosting this event with my dynamic friend, Salma Makar. And we are fortunate, in addition to having this national speaker, Dr. Kaboob, in having local state level advocates in Karen Camblin and Fanula Fisk, two people who are working hard here in Virginia to combat global warming and to address ways that climate change and our current energy solutions harm our communities, especially the pipelines and the compressor stations. They harm especially our communities of color. And in Virginia, that's frequently African Americans. So I know that many of you have been on for a while, but if you haven't, then we're just asking you to go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And then we'll take all the questions at the end, because after we go through this, what speakers say, then we'll have time for questions. And then we want to end with, what can we, all of us here, be doing to change this narrative? So the Green New Deal, as Dr. Kaboob explained, is not only an economic or an environmental policy to lower carbon emissions and deal with climate change, but it is also this equity plan, providing jobs and housing, as well as improvements in our infrastructure and so much more. So some of the resolutions that Salma and the others have been working on directly affect these issues. Ensuring housing for everyone, ensuring these other issues. So they introduced this resolution to combat this emergency that has been pointed out that scientists in the UN have warned us of. We only have 10 years to manage this raging global change that we've seen destroying lands, peoples, and animals, even whole habitats. We've all been seeing this in the news. So we need to correct for this physical overburdening of our planet. We have been doing this. We have been overburdening what our planet can handle, and we've got to stop. And as Dr. Kaboob was saying, we also are creating these huge imbalances in our society, and we've got to change that. And the Green New Deal talks about that, a more equitable global community that supports a decent life and livelihood for all. So we're going to begin with our guest speakers and Salma addressing our current state and goals in Virginia. Then we'll have time for people, as I said, to ask questions of all of our speakers. So we really want to talk about next steps and what we delegate activists do to help combat global warming. So Salma, will you take it away with your first speaker?
So our first speaker is Karen Camblin. Karen, are you with us? So Karen's going to speak for about 15 minutes. I'm going to hop in during part of that, and then we're going to hand it over to Finn for 8 minutes. We're then going to have a group discussion and 5 minutes on next steps. Karen, are you with us?
Yes, I am here. One moment, can you hear me? Everything okay?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Camblin. I am the co-director for the Green New Deal with Lee Williams. And we have been—
Green New Deal Virginia, you mean?
What did I say?
Green New Deal. Like
yeah, okay. Green New Deal Virginia. And we have been working on this since 2019. And so I have a brief presentation that I'm gonna start and just, here we go. Let's see here, share screen. This one, share. Okay, great. Can you see that? That's okay?
Yes, we're good to go.
Awesome. Okay, so like I said, I'm here to talk about the Green New Deal Virginia. I was contacted a couple days ago to present on this, and I was also asked to talk about environmental justice and really talk about the social justice piece of the Green New Deal. So it was a pretty lengthy list of items that everybody wanted me to kind of do an overview on. I'll try my best to cover as much as I can in the short period of time I have with you, and I am more than happy to continue this conversation offline as well, and I'll answer as many questions as we get them. But the Green New Deal Virginia, let's see, how do I forward this? Okay, so the Green New Deal Virginia is going to focus on the inequities that our residents here in the Commonwealth are experiencing. But before I get into the Green New Deal, I just want to talk about the environmental justice piece. So what is environmental justice? And here we have a definition that's used by the National NAACP, which is a call for the fair and equal treatment of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identification, ability, or income level in the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, policies, and programs. And so that is a really robust and tall overview of what environmental justice is. And here I have just some really brief pictures that are going to highlight environmental injustices, which is the unfair and unequal treatment of people, vulnerable and frontline communities that experience disproportionate and negative impacts from the enforcement, the implementation, and the environmental environmental laws, regulations, policy, and programs. So we have a picture of Union Hill, which everyone is, I hope, is very well aware and active on in preventing the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, particularly the oversized compressor station in Union Hill. We see the environmental degradation of the Mountain Valley pipelines as they're putting in the pipelines, and they're causing soil erosions and other damage, as well as destroying some of our local and organic farmers and quality of life for residents in the area. We're aware of discriminatory practices that serve as barriers for equal opportunities, employment, and access to quality jobs. And when we say quality jobs, what we're talking about is that we don't want to continue to hear about families that need to work 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs just to barely make it. Our quality jobs is supposed to be able to give everyone the basic essentials for a quality life. This includes access to medical care. This includes access to adequate education, and segue to the next slide, which is to the far right, access to quality and nutritious foods. This is this map with a lot of blobs of green that is highlighting concentrated areas here in the Commonwealth that are experiencing food injustice and food deserts. In the bottom left, starting off, we show how these inequities and injustices can appear where devastating projects are brought into the backyards of people's homes. This is the Southside Connector in Chesapeake. The pipeline is over to the left, and the right is, you can see how close it is to people's home, as well as where everyone wants to send their little kiddos out to play. And this pipeline is going through an historically African-American community as well. We see these inequities in discriminatory practices such as redlining, as we see lack of access to affordable housing, as the housing camp we see here in Richmond that has been in the news over the last several months. And then, of course, inadequate transportation and access to affordable transportation. We are relying way too much on the single private car to get around, but there's some families that cannot afford either owning a safe operable car, but also there's a huge property tax associated with it. There is high insurance rates and all of those things that put owning your own car further out of the reach of some families, which is why we really need to focus on transit and public transportation, as well as frontline communities. Communities of color are the first to feel the brunt of climate change and the worst. And so we really need to address all of the climate change issues as well. So I'm quite sure everybody have seen this picture in which it's used to explain what equity is. The reality that some folks have more resources and are able to have access and be able to function in a very advantageous lifestyle, whereas others have various barriers in which they are supposed to overcome. And on the last panel is equity, in which resources are allocated not based on, let's do a fair distribution, but let's distribute the resources to areas that are in need. Now, let's just take this picture just one step further. And let's just assume that this is a free game, that everyone is supposed to have equal access to this game. And the fence is the barriers, and that is the systemic barriers that we've been talking about, whether it be redlining, whether it be all of these different hoops that families have to jump through to get access to additional funding so that they can open their own business, or children having such a barrier and able to function and have a successful academic career. And that's what that fence is. And let's just say that if we look at the very far left, the reality panel, it is assuming that the person in the purple shirt does not have the ability to see anything, right? And that is far from it. This is what we should be striving for. We should be striving for a society in which those barriers are removed and everyone would be able to function as they see fit, and with the resources that they need, as well as their own grit, right? So this is what we want to go for. We want to remove the systemic barrier. Everything else is just a Band-Aid fix. And then we'll have a true and just society. So let's just go over to the Green New Deal. And this is what the Green New Deal Virginia can do. We can reconnect the economy with the people, our health, our communities, and our ecosystem. So the Green New Deal Virginia Coalition was started over in 2019 by delegates Sam Razul and Elizabeth Guzman. And this is our mission statement right here. But the two big things that we'd like to address is climate change and inequity. And these two crises are inextricably joined. And it has to be, addressing these things has to be part of the just transition. And the Green New Deal Virginia Coalition is committed to that, putting justice where we need it. The Green New Deal, we are following 5 policy themes of the Green New Deal. I'll just go through these briefly, which is a just and equitable 100% renewables, large investments in job training and programs, as well as energy efficiency and a smart grid, clean air, water, and land for all, and investing in local scale agriculture in our communities across Virginia, and also prioritizing equitable and affordable and clean transportation systems. The Green New Deal Virginia Coalition is comprised of over 60 or 7 different organizations, and as well as numerous individuals that are committed to this cause as well. This is just a brief overview of some of the coalition building that we did in 2019, starting with our coalition summit that helped actually revise. We were told by the coalition how to finalize our mission statement and our policy themes. And actually, it was at this coalition summit that we added policy theme number 5, which was looking at transportation, which is currently the largest greenhouse gas emission contributor here in Virginia. And this is just a brief overview of some of the Green New Deal Virginia outreach efforts that we've conducted to date. We've had a lot of different group meetings and presentations, over 100 attendees. We're at our inaugural summit. We've done online actions, but I have to do a little pause on this one and just highlight these numbers are based only on Green New Deal Virginia efforts. We've had coalition partners who are strongly committed to what we're talking about. They were strongly committed to our suites of laws that I'll be going over shortly, as well as individuals, and they too did some online outreach efforts. So these are just numbers based on what Green New Deal Virginia Coalition initiated on our own. We also held a summit with over 200 people registered, and we have our social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. As well, these are relevant and supportive efforts of others that are in line with what the Green New Deal Virginia Coalition had done. Like I said, we started in 2019 when it was brought down by Delegates Sam Razul and Elizabeth Guzman, and it was going to have a legislative piece, but what they realized, they saw that we really didn't have the needs and the issues of Virginia properly identified. And that's when we started doing the coalition building, reaching out to different organizations to discuss what is it that we need in Virginia. But we also wanted to make sure that our Green New Deal Virginia was in line with what other organizations were doing as well. So these are some of the supportive efforts that have happened to complement or supplement what the Green New Deal Virginia Coalition is doing, which includes the 2019 DPVA resolution that passed unanimously, endorsing the Green New Deal Virginia Coalition. It is in line with what the resolutions of the Green New Deal, as well as DNC Environmental and Climate Crisis Council had just released their recommendations for the 2020 Democratic Platform. And in their report, they said that the action plan was informed by the vision and aspirations of the Green New Deal. So this is an overview of our policies that we did in 2020. So we, as a coalition, we met many of time, as I indicated before, and we also had working groups, which I'll go over in a little bit. And we identified a lot of different policies and came up with these 8 bills that we presented in the 2020 General Assembly, as well as a resolution. The ones that are grayed out were the ones that did not pass, but we are going to be addressing them again in 2021. And the ones that are darkened are the ones that actually passed. But I wanted to highlight House Bill number 1, House Bill 77, that was introduced by Delegate Sam Razul, the Green New Deal Act. And in this, just a highlight of that one was a clean energy mandate that required clean energy resources by 2028, 100% by 2036. It looked at a moratorium for fossil fuel projects starting in 2021, which included any new generating facilities, developing a clean action plan for Virginia by 2022, establishing a minimum energy efficiency goals, looking at development of a robust job training program. It included strong labor protections, as well as environmental justice protections for communities that historically have borne the brunt of environmental hazards. We also included and supported policies that protect environmental justice communities. We have a pilot program that was started that is going to invest in community solar for low income and religious institutions. And we're also had a bill that promotes transit-oriented development strategies that was sponsored by Delegate Guzman. And so here, as I have mentioned a couple of times about different working groups that we do have, but before I talk about the working groups, I'd like you to look at the Venn diagram, just to give you another perspective of what the Green New Deal Virginia is. So you take this Venn diagram and you look at, these are the 3 things that we're looking at. The environment, climate change, right? That's one circle. Jobs, the economy, that's another circle, and equity, social justice. And you put that all together, and that intersectionality, well, where all 3 intersects, that's the Green New Deal Virginia. And that is how we are identifying our issues and our policies to making sure that it's transformative and intentional. Over to the right is a list of our working groups that are currently working at analyzing what was done in 2020, looking at what failed and what didn't fail, and coming up with our 2021 legislative platform. We added a new one called Funding the Green New Deal Virginia. And this is where we can start to answer and address the big question is, how do you pay for the Green New Deal? Now, we all know, because we're all here today to learn more about the Green New Deal, Virginia, and just to learn about how can we have a more democratic process moving forward, we do know that the social cost and the environmental cost outweighs us looking at monetary value. But still, that question still needs to be addressed. And we wanted to make sure that our efforts of our dedicated volunteers do not go to the wayside just because of one distracting question. So we plan to address everything, both from the social justice issue, climate justice, the jobs, as well as the financial piece. And so I know we're going to talk about this later on, but I just wanted to just briefly highlight these are some of the things that you can be involved with the Green New Deal Virginia. You visit us online, join our coalition, and keep an eye out for some of our action alerts that we will be having. So I hope I did not go over my time, but that concludes my presentation. I will give it to Salma, who is now going to talk about her resolution.
Hi, so I thought we could talk about this together since we were both on the resolution committee for CD10. And obviously, like, what you have to say on this is also really important. So basically, some of us from some of the Bernie delegates got together to write a resolution that tried to bridge that gap between the Green New Deal Virginia resolution that had passed in DPVA and the Green New Deal and the federal Green New Deal, which we saw as more progressive. It's important to point out that the original Green New Deal Virginia resolution that passed the DPVA unanimously, that was really the beginning of Green New Deal Virginia and that coalition. Am I right on that, Karen? Please jump in when appropriate.
Yeah, so the resolution that was passed that we worked on from CD10 was focused more on the federal level, which I think Finn's going to really talk about in more detail. And so we realized that we had one on a state level that passed in 2019, but it's also very important. And I think I only caught the ending part of it, but there is an importance of having Green New Deal on both a federal and a state level. There's certain things that we need to have a focus on a state level, which is why, as I indicated, why the Green New Deal Virginia coalition was started. And so the way I kind of look at it really briefly is, you have laws and regulation that are passed on a federal level, and it serves as a guidance for what occurs on the state. Then the state interprets it and then says, okay, localities, this is how you implement it, right? So that is one of the reasons why it's so important that we cannot get too caught up in, in what has happened on a federal legislation, but really look at what is it that the residents of the Commonwealth needs. And that is what the Green New Deal Virginia coalition is doing. But it is very important that we do need both.
And the resolution that we got passed in CD10 essentially said that, at the time CD10, and then we proposed it to the State Resolution Committee, and I don't think they took it up, but we were essentially saying the DPVA, the Democrats in Virginia, fully support every tenet of the federal Green New Deal, because it's really important, as Karen pointed out, for us to be working in harmony between the federal and the state level, and be as progressive as possible on this. And Karen, if you have any words, we're running a little short on time, so I'll just keep it to that. But if you have anything you'd like to say to wrap it up, or otherwise we're going to turn it over to Finn.
Yeah, no, I'm fine waiting until we get to the question and answer piece, but just keeping in mind that the Green New Deal is just looking to, proposes to create, good jobs while addressing the climate and emergency, restoring Virginia's environment and focusing and trying to address the inequities of systemic and discriminatory practices of the past.
Okay, thank you so much. And now we're going to turn it over to, okay,
I'm going to briefly just introduce Finn, if that's okay. Great, great. So Ms. Fionnuala Fisk is a co-coordinator of the Richmond Sunrise Movement and leader on the state level. And so she's going to talk to us a little bit about what the Sunrise Movement is about in general and the struggles that they've had trying to create a better future for us all, and two particular goals of theirs. So thank you so much, Finn.
Hi, great. Hi, my name is Fionnuala Fisk. I am the co-hub coordinator for Sunrise Richmond. I work at the state level as well. Thank you guys all so much for kind of talking through some of the Green New Deal stuff already, and to our last panel as well for talking through some of the financial side. I'm going to talk about the Green New Deal, Sunrise, so the Green New Deal kind of more at the national level, and then kind of Sunrise, what we do, who we are, etc. So for those of y'all that are only just joining us, the Green New Deal, the concept has kind of floated around for a while, but the current iteration has a few different components. The way that Sunrise kind of frames it is as targeting the triple crises of climate change, income inequality, and racial injustice. So we seek 100% clean and renewable energy by 2030, a guaranteed living wage job for anyone who needs one, and then a just transition for both workers and frontline communities. The Green New Deal is probably most known as House Resolution 109, which was put forward by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and it had 95 House co-sponsors, and then Senator Edward Markey also put forth the same in the Senate. Sunrise Movement champions the Green New Deal. So we're youth-led, we're a progressive movement across the country that seeks to combat these crises by seeking mass mobilization. Our strategy includes direct action, including arrestable actions like sit-ins in Capitol buildings. We're nonviolent, but we do believe that climate change and inequality are existential threats, and we show that by putting our bodies on the line. We don't believe that this can be solved by the entrenched interests that created this problem, and then instead we need to turn to mobilization on a scale not seen since the New Deal in the 1940s. At the moment, on the national level, we're focusing on electing Green New Deal champions, and our top targets nationally at the moment are Jamal Bowman, Charles Booker, and Andrew Romanoff. I'll circle back to them later. And then our other top priority at the national level at the moment is supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. Sorry, one sec. Is that screen showing up for people? I think Mariana, did you?
Yes, someone is sharing their screen, but it's all white. Is that on purpose? Mariana, it appears to be coming from you.
Let me stop this sharing for the moment and we can come back to that. I'll show that image. I can pull that image up later towards the end when I talk through kind of action items. The other top priority.
You can share your own screen too, by the way. We made you co-host, so you can share your screen.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I don't need it just yet. I'll share it later. Thank you. Our other top priority at the national level right at this very second is supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. Climate degradation and systemic racism are both symptoms of greed and the profit motive. Looking at you, capitalism. We see that environmental issues overwhelmingly impact victims of systemic racism, which of course is a phenomenon known as environmental racism. Sunrise has 8 active hubs in the state and 453 hubs nationally. At the statewide level, we're showing up on the streets for Black Lives Matter. Some of my friends are going out every day. And we also engage in other political work. We just announced our endorsements for the House of Representatives primaries, which of course are on Tuesday. We have endorsed Kasim Rashid in the 1st District and Zainab Mohseni in the 11th District. And again, I'll circle back to our endorsements later. At the local level, here in Richmond, we have a semi-regular speaker series. We're a proud partner in the Green New Deal Virginia Coalition. And yesterday at 4 a.m., we pulled off something that you guys might have seen in the news, a 30-foot by 50-foot Black Lives Matter redesign of the Virginia state flag, which we installed on the Lee Bridge. So really quickly, I will pull up that image and show it to you guys. So that was what we did yesterday at 4 a.m. Can you guys see me back again? I just want to make sure.
Do you want to stop the
There we go.
go back at you?
So that is kind of Sunrise. Enough about us and more about the Green New Deal. So obviously the green part of that is pretty self-explanatory. That's climate change and trying to combat and mitigate the effects of climate change. But I want to focus more on the equity piece. The New Deal, for all of the good that it did, exacerbated the racial wealth gap. For example, farm and domestic labor, two sectors which included a lot of Black Americans at that time, neither were covered by the National Industrial Recovery Act of 1933. What some people don't realize is that this bill is as much about economic inequality as it is about climate change. We are living in the most unequal times in American history, so let's stop. Some of the goals of the Green New Deal. We want to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions, create millions of good high-wage jobs, invest in infrastructure and industry, secure a sustainable environment for all, and then promote justice and equity by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing historical oppression. It's a mix of climate and equity policies. So on the climate side, upgrading our existing infrastructure to deal with climate change-related disasters, building energy efficient smart power grids, overhauling the US transportation system. On the equity side, we've got policies like guaranteeing a job with a family sustaining wage, requiring that our Green New Deal projects be high quality union jobs, and then providing all members of society with high quality healthcare. So where's the bill? There's not yet the bill package in Congress. We have the resolution, but really at the moment, the Green New Deal is kind of just like a set of ideas. Right now, Sunrise is focusing on electing Green New Deal friendly candidates who can then kind of introduce the legislation to make that happen. Obviously, a part of that is taking back the Senate. So we'll return to Charles Booker in a little bit. And so that's kind of the policies that I mentioned are a very small kind of portion of the ideas that fall under the umbrella of the Green New Deal. How do we pay for it? Spending. The last panel talked more about modern monetary theory. So I'm not going to kind of talk too much about the financing, but I will just answer kind of the one kind of main question. Will we need new taxes or high federal debt? Very probably not, but it depends. What it depends on is whether the federal spending ends up exerting significant inflationary pressures in the macroeconomy, which require taxation and or bond issuances to absorb excess money. This seems unlikely though. The tax cuts of December 2017 injected nearly $2 trillion into the economy and there's no inflation. The Afghan and Iraq wars injected nearly $3 trillion and again, no inflation. And the Fed has in fact since 2012 tried to bring up consumer price inflation to 2% and has only succeeded doing so in a few quarters in the last several years. So really deflation is kind of more of a problem for quote unquote developed economies than inflation. Also, the Green New Deal will super boost productivity in our economy, which makes the threat of consumer price inflation recede kind of even further into the background. Inflation is essentially the problem of too much money chasing too few goods, and in a new green economy, we'll have solar panels, solar farms, windmills, hydroelectric plants, carbon neutral automobiles, refurbished buildings and infrastructure, and a host of other products. So we'll have plenty of new goods to absorb the new money. If inflation was to return as a threat, we have tools that we can deal with it. So taxes and bond issuances, and also macroprudential limits on bank overlending and financial market speculation. So enough money talk. Now that I've wowed you, how can you help? And I'm going to quickly pull up my screen and share my screen again.
Oh, before we do the 5-minute wrap up where we go over with Karen and Finn, like what can people do and what are concrete next steps, we wanted to have a question and answer discussion section, which we're going to have to cut down significantly to a couple of minutes. So far, it looks like there's only one question. which came from someone who has since left. But Michael, do you want to go ahead and read that question? Or otherwise, I can do it. So the question is, what's the best part about being a community advocate, and what advice would you give to young folks who have a passion for public service? And that came from Tura Arsala, who has since, I guess, left. So for Karen or Finn, take it away.
Karen, do you want to go ahead first?
Well, since you said young advocates, I'm going to assume that was you. So I'm going to let you start and I'll just follow up. Okay.
Sure. So I think to answer the first part of the question, the best part about this is kind of a low barrier to entry almost. I got started with Sunrise like only 6 months ago, and now I am presenting a talk to you guys. And that doesn't come from me just kind of being like, hi, can I do this? Like, I'm putting in the work. But the point is that if you put in the work, you can get things done. And second, advice for other kind of young folks out there, talk to me. I'd like to get you kind of hooked in with Sunrise. But more kind of broadly, my advice is just kind of remember that we are the inheritors of this earth, and so we kind of need to step up and not kind of wait for our turn, because if we wait for our turn, our world is going to be dead. We have to kind of step in and seize power and kind of make space for ourselves, because nobody has ever in the history of the universe just kind of been like, oh yeah, sure, here is all of the space. Like, you always have to kind of step in and claim it yourself. So that's my advice to young people.
Okay, so the next question I'm going to ask.
Selma, before you go on to that, I just wanted to add to what Finn, I agree with everything Finn said, but I also just wanted to add with the Green New Deal, what our commitment is just exactly that, to make sure that the earth will be healthy for future generations. And we look to work with, and we look forward to working with the younger voice, and we really need it as part of our coalition. So I am so amazed and impressed and in absolute awe with the Sunrise Movement and with Finn and what everybody's done. And I just want to let everybody know, they were a huge part of the Green New Deal Virginia Coalition in 2020. They came out, they represented, and they really helped us not only get the bills that I identified passed, but they really made sure that the message that the Green New Deal Virginia Coalition was trying to say was heard, and heard loudly and resoundingly. So the young voice, yay, thank you.
So we're really short on time, so we're going to take the second and last question from Mikey Gilstra, who's running for DNC candidate. Why are farmers not excited about the Green New Deal? Is there something that would affect the industry? So if we could maybe keep these answers a little shorter and then go right into what are concrete steps we can do as activists to help with the Green New Deal and with the environment. Thank you.
Do you mind saying the question again? I'm sorry, I know we're short on time, but do you mind saying it?
Why are farmers not excited about the Green New Deal? Is there something that would affect that industry?
Well, we have, if you don't mind, can I go first, and I'll be really fast, Finn, if you're, okay. So one of the 8 working groups that I showed is food and agriculture, and we are working with local farmers. They're actually excited about this. So some of the concerns that we're hearing from local farmers is lack of access to funding. We've seen what happened when the bills came out for payment, whether it was from the tax cut or even with COVID-19. And a lot of the funds, the resources went to larger farms, right? So we are working with local heritage farms that have been in families for decades. They are supportive of a movement in which we're going to focus on local scale agricultural practices. Not only that, but innovative practices that help to resolve some of the climate change issues, whether it's through carbon sequestration, agricultural techniques, and those types of things.
I think that
so much. And could you go ahead and put up the screen with the names of the candidates? I know I'm sort of interrupting,
Yeah.
but we do have to go on to the next one. But I do want her to be able to show you the candidates. The elections are on Tuesday. So they could use phone banking and donations.
Yes. So these are our candidates that Sunrise has endorsed. We would really appreciate if you guys have any time before Tuesday, if you guys can phone bank either for our kind of state level champions, Kasim Rashid and Zainab Mohsini, or national ones. I'd like to focus on Charles Booker for a second. He is running to unseat Mitch McConnell. We've got to get Mitch McConnell out of here. Charles Booker is kind of living the struggle. He actually nearly died from insulin rationing. He is also out on the streets working with Black Lives Matter at the moment, and his campaign is raising money for bail funds. He is walking the walk and talking the talk. Please, these are kind of 3 champions at the national level and also 2 champions at the state level, and I've included their information below. So go out and phone bank, y'all, or donate if you don't have time to phone bank.
Thank you so much. That was just wonderful. So that's one of the big next steps is getting politicians who support the Green New Deal policies elected. And lobbying on a local level, I think also. Do some of the experts want to jump in? And I include you too, Dr. Kaboub. What can we activists on the local level? This is great to have our screen still up so you can copy the information if you like. But how can we help tilt the balance towards wider recognition on the part of officials and just people in general that this is an emergency? We can't wait any longer.
So, one of the things that can happen, this is Karen, is reaching out to your local official, whether it's your county board of supervisor or definitely your state delegate and your state senator, and let them know that you want a Green New Deal Virginia. We've got a lot of information on our website that provides, talking points, reaching out and doing letter to editors and talking about how important it is for us to start focusing on a more humane and just, and all of the things that we're doing with Green New Deal is not only looking for justice and to fix all the ills and injustices of the past, but they're also very data driven. Our working groups are comprised of local advocates as well as experts in the field, and we're doing a data-driven focus on all of our solutions that are coming out. But yeah, just reaching out to your state officials, your local officials, and letting them know that you support the Green New Deal. We've got, yeah, so I'm gonna end there since we're short on time. I want to give everybody else a chance to talk.
Can I say one more thing to add to what Karen just said? I'm a big fan of the Sunrise Movement, as you can tell from my T-shirt. But it's very important for us to know who does what. We're on the same page in terms of what we want. We want a livable planet, decent healthcare, clean air, clean water. All of these things, we're on the same page, and it's very important to know what we demand and from whom we demand it. Yes, state officials, city officials, county commissioners have a role to play in terms of prioritizing things at the local level. But if we want this transformative thing, we need them on our side to demand from the federal government, from the 535 elected officials in DC, to do their job and to set the priorities straight. So yes, we can call for a statewide Green New Deal, but we have to be careful, not to forget that, the federal government is the entity that can actually make it happen financially. We mobilize, we organize at the local level. We push back against corrupt local state officials and city officials. We elect, people who will do the work, but also make sure that we unseat the 535 people who are not willing to do their job, who have the power of the purse and have abdicated that power to Wall Street, have abdicated that power to Big Pharma. They work for us. So we need to have our state officials, city officials, and our local organizers on board to demand that they do their job. And if we don't, then they're going to spin it left and right and force us to, you know, struggle for crumbs at the local level.
Okay, thank you. I think that wraps us up. Oh, Mariana, were you trying to say something? You were muted. I think that wraps us up. The next.
Selma, can I just add one teeny tiny? I promise I'll be really fast. I promise. Another thing that we can do as local activists is whenever we're seeing bills or anything like that, or actions or tasks or programs or everything, we need to ask that one question: is what is it that is being presented? What is going to be the outcome of what is being of this particular bill, right? So we have to make sure that those outcomes are going to support and help the community. It's going to get rid of all of those barriers that prevent a community from being sustainable. And we have to make sure that it's something that's going to be sustainable for a long period of time. And these are some of the things we really need to make sure that we have to start demanding that our bills are no longer symbols, they're no longer just Band-Aids, but they're actually going to do something to support our residents, to support our individuals, support our businesses, and support our communities. We can no longer move with short-term, quick fixes that really don't help the little person and the everyday person and only helps the corporation. And that is another thing that we need to be able to do as local activists, is to start questioning why and demand transformative and intentional outcomes. And that's
Okay. Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you to all our speakers. Thank you, Dr. Kaboub, for sticking around through all that to give us your piece. And thank you, Finn. Thank you, Karen. You guys have been amazing. I wish we had more time, unfortunately. Then I need to hand it over to Susan Mead, who's about to start the intersectionality workshop.